And that's how we start the day off. Huh. That was very hey, by the way, hey everybody. Why is that not working? There we go. Okay, we're back to full screen now. Hey, for everybody that's here right now, my name is Darren. This is Victor over here, and we're the co-host of DevOps Paradox. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Let's slow down. Okay. So today, just an open Q&A. We've already got some questions in the chat box. If you've got some questions and you haven't typed them in yet, go ahead and type them in. We're going to talk about a few things that we saw throughout the week first, and then we'll get to your questions. So, big news for the week. No, not that big news.
No?
Big news for the week. I was able to buy toilet paper. It's a good thing.
You can safely poop.
I can always safely poop. The question is, could I have done other things? No. The pipes in our house aren't great, so we have to use single ply, and all the single plies have been out for quite a while. So fortunately, I was able to get single ply. So here's the first big news of the week, at least from our perspective. SUSE acquiring Rancher. I think this is a big deal. Starting to see some consolidation. Now, very early consolidation, but consolidation nonetheless.
You know, it's a period where companies are grabbing for success stories in Kubernetes, especially those who failed to transform themselves. Right? Kind of, when you think about it, what is the relevance of SUSE in Kubernetes world?
Zero.
Not exactly. Did SUSE try to do something Kubernetes related? Most likely. Did anybody outside of SUSE got excited about? Not really.
No.
And this is not kind of like trashing SUSE. This is happening all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And SUSE bought Rancher, and Rancher is a good choice. That's my favorite distribution for self-managed clusters. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. So congrats, Rancher. Congrats, SUSE. Hopefully things continue on well. I like Rancher for on-prem.
Yeah.
To me they were the first real option from a vendor perspective. You could always take the upstream. I don't like upstream, but that's a different conversation. It's just a little too. I just don't like it. I'm not opposed to it. It's just not a preference. Second item for the week. So we're just that was easy. If you haven't heard that, a friend of mine he works for a software company, and they deploy basically everything in a box, if you will, but that box is Rancher. And he hadn't heard about this. So he was surprised when I told him later that day of, hey, did you know that your distro got bought? So.
But it's normal that it is really recent, like a day or two old. And those negotiations are always kept in private.
Yeah. So next, app to container. Now, this actually came out last week, June 30th. So if you remember, last week we had two guests on. We had Adam on Thursday, and then we had Miko on Friday, so we didn't do our normal news stuff. So some of these are a little bit older. This is one of those. This is a way to easily, I haven't tried it yet, but I'm going to use that word. They didn't use it. Easy way to go ahead and take your .NET or your Java applications and make them run in EKS or ECS. Magic. I need that Shia LaBeouf magic thing. You can containerize 3.5 or higher that was running on 7.5 or higher. And then any Java applications, whether it's JBoss, Tomcat, generic applications using Boot, WebSphere, WebLogic, whatever. We talked about consolidation of the Kubernetes vendors. Is this consolidation of, as we've been talking about with our serverless series that started this week on the podcast, Are we starting to see containers becoming the standard now, the standard package? You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Container images, let me be more precise, are going to be our standard package now. And we are all now also let's be kind of like frank. Kubernetes API is the next standard after that, right?
Yeah.
And this thing, so I haven't had time really to go through this, but this thing looks weird to me. Kind of, it's some kind of, I don't know what you're trying to do, but whatever you're trying to do sounds very weird to me. Like kind of that output. What the heck is that?
Yeah, I know. This is just the inventory of whatever you did, and I don't know.
Exactly. Kind of like it's Amazon something inventing again something that I must say doesn't feel right. I haven't had time to spend with it, and I'll be honest. I don't see, with that 5-minute pitch that I'm supposed to get interested or never look at it again.
There's too many words here right now.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at. It may be fine.
Now, what I think that the importance of this is, the real importance is not really converting into containers, because Dockerfile is sufficiently simple. There is much more going there. And I think that the importance of this is actually all focused on ECS. And I think that the next news is going to go down that line. It's kind of building this ecosystem around ECS and making easier, recognizing in a way that ECS is not really easy. And it's falling behind. And I think that this is attempt to kind of resurrect maybe ECS.
Maybe. And that's where we'll go ahead and go there now. So there was an announcement. Come on. Thank you. Okay. AWS Copilot. No, AWS is not paying us anything. But unlike App2 Container, both Victor and myself got pretty excited about this because it's very interesting. If you've watched the stream or listened to the podcast much, you know my maybe not undying love for Pulumi, but I like Pulumi a lot. One of the first things I did with Pulumi was build out an ECS infrastructure to run some apps. It was interesting learning. I wasted a lot of time, and now it's a one-liner. So I think this came out, is today the 9th? I've lost track. No, that was yesterday. So this came out yesterday, Thursday the 9th. And it's a concept, they just call it Copilot. And basically, and as you listen to the podcast, over especially the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear us talk more and more about, here's my code, go run it. Right? That's not really any different than what we've been talking about. But this literally takes your code and goes and runs it. Now
it's very
it's Heroku-ish. But not exactly, because its underlier is ECS. I did some stuff early this morning looking at it, and it's creating cloud formations and all this other stuff, but I don't have to know anything about it because it doesn't matter. You create an application, you create environments, and then you have services. If you've worked with Elastic Beanstalk at all, this is also very Elastic Beanstalk-ish, at least the concepts. So their examples are pretty simplistic right now, and I'm wanting to spend some more time on it this weekend, because although this post is good, it's not how I would do things in real life. So I'm going to try to write something up to where it's more real life of how I think I would operate something that's based on this. The other thing that's interesting here is the way the URL is set up. Notice it's containers. Now they always have containers, but it's not like, not that big of a deal. I'm hesitant to say I'm excited about this, but I'm excited about this. Because if it just works, now the one thing that Victor called out, I'll let you say it. What was the thing you didn't like about it?
It's there are actually quite a few things I don't like. So I'm not so as excited as you are, which I actually didn't have time to comment yet with you. Oh, wait, let me first reiterate what I do like, because it's in line with what you said. If I would, for whatever reason, be using ECS with Fargate, this would be like godsend.
Yeah.
Setting up ECS, Fargate, and all that stuff is a nightmare, which is not the big problem if you're a sysadmin ops type of person, because then you know that stuff. But the sole purpose of Fargate is to simplify things for developers. Right. And let me tell you that an average developer would never set up correctly ECS Fargate. It's a nightmare, unless you're a sysadmin, right? Now, so this is a godsend, because this says, okay, look, you don't need to deal with all that stuff you need to deal. You run Copilot, does the things, great, amazing, developer happy, right?
Yep.
Now, the problem I have with this is, first of all, it's too opinionated and doesn't give me what I really need. What I really need to begin with is to say, here's my image. Here is a few parameters like have up 10 replicas, right?
Yep.
Go.
Yep.
It doesn't allow me to do that.
Yep.
There is no option to do that. There is an option to say, here's my code, and it will build a container image and then push and do some bunch of other magic, like use CloudFormation to do stuff, and then it will push that image. But that's not necessarily what I want.
Right.
Because if I want to give you my code, then why are you building it on my machine?
Yeah. Now, let's do this for just a second. Oh, you also have to, because you have to have Docker installed in order for it to work, which is sort of strange to me. Now, what's interesting too is, why is that not working? Okay, here let's go to the official part and see if there's anything here. Oh, the official is actually just the code.
Yeah.
So, by the way, if you haven't figured this out,
there is a link to the docs.
Oh, is there a link to the docs? Did I miss it?
Yeah, somewhere there.
There we go. Thank you. Okay. So there's, okay, let's see if there's anything interesting on this side. Services, service types. Those are the two. Oh, it does have
If you look at actually the sections and commands, you will see that this is a spit-and image of Docker Compose. So basically, I don't know whether they're using it in the background, probably not. I mean, on the server side, almost certainly they do. Right. So basically, this is interface that makes your Docker Compose integrated with DCS in a way.
Yeah.
Simplistic.
Yeah. So this looks interesting. I may be overly excited. That's also a possibility too.
So let me tell you what bothers me the most about this is if I look at container as a service in Google, Azure, and AWS, right?
Yep.
Google Azure, run a command like AZ, do this, create a container, whatever the command is, Google something, right? And there you go. Now,
yep.
In AWS, you need to create a cluster, you need to create subnets, you need to create load balancer, you need to create half of internet, right? Yep. And then you can say, go, this is my container image.
Yep.
Now, this solves this problem, but solves it in the wrong way, because what I want to see is Amazon giving me that service saying, this is my image, go.
Yep.
Not to kind of make a wrapper around something. There's nothing wrong with wrappers, but I want AWS as a service to do that, kind of like hide that nonsense. Not nonsense, but complexity.
Yeah, it's like this is a Copilot is what I would call not a high-level abstraction, but it's more of a mid-level abstraction.
Yeah.
And hey, I'd rather have a mid-level abstraction if I'm working with Fargate than having no level of abstraction.
Exactly. That's
So
why.
it's a good first step, right?
No, it's great. So for ECS Pargate users, this is amazing.
Yeah.
My complaints are more when if I compare Pargate in general with others, right?
Yeah.
And then I get into conflicts in my head. But if you're an AWS user, this is great.
Yeah. So we won't belabor that one anymore. The echo. Okay. Weird. All right, so we'll do that. Okay, so we're going to. I'm going to pull up Alex's first question. Are you ready? Did you see it?
I did. No, I didn't. I didn't check the live comments.
Okay.
Alex.
So we'll still put it up, and we'll give you our standard. Actually, Victor will give you our standard answer. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here it goes now.
So here's the answer. You can ask me anything. Literally, I will always answer any question. Doesn't matter. Ask me kind of like, what's your favorite, and what's your shoe size? I'm going to answer anything.
Yep.
Except to compare CI/CD solutions. That's the only exception to the rule. And the simple reason is that I don't want to trash. I work for CI/CD company. I don't want to trash competition, and I don't want not to. So I'm subjective. Darin as well. Whatever we say will be either interpreted one way or the other, but it will never be interpreted well, because we have a vested interest in certain solutions. Anything else, literally anything. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I will say something that should be generic enough. Please use a CI tool.
Yes.
Even though we can't have more comments around it than that, please use one. Go beyond. Just do it. Okay. Now let's get to the second question. Which works better in production, COPS or kubeadm?
COPS.
COPS, hands down.
Hands down. Kind of don't go kubeadm. I mean, so let me put it this way, and this is going to sound a bit offensive. If you're asking this question, kubeadm is not a good option. Kind of this is for hardcore, kind of like hardcore, those 1%. And I could even discuss whether for hardcore people it's a good option. But it's too much hassle. It's not meant to be used directly. Don't. We mentioned Rancher. Use Rancher, right? Or you said COPS. COPS is also okay. I mean, I don't know whether COPS is okay. It's slowly fading away because the target providers for COPS are building their own Kubernetes as a service, but better than kubeadm.
Alex, hopefully that we gave you one complete non-answer, and we gave you hopefully one answer. Right? So we're 50-50 right now. 50-50. Yeah. Okay. Question from Chris: as a developer, is an AWS certification worth it? Let me rephrase that just a little bit. As a developer, is any certification worth it?
That's the right question.
It depends. It depends. What? Are you going to leave?
No, I'm asking, should I or you?
No, you go ahead first, and then I will correct you if I have to.
So, personal opinion, right, is that I think that certifications are very useful at the very beginning because it proves that you don't have experience, but you have willingness to get experience, right?
Yep.
Now, to be honest, those few times when I was in a position of hiring, I looked at certifications for young, right, inexperienced juniors. But if somebody comes to me and says, I have 20 years of experience and I have those 57 certificates, it's kind of like, why are you telling me that?
Right.
I vote experience over certificates. Certificates are not, in my head, and this is personal opinion, are not additional value on top of experience. It's until you become experienced.
Right. So I will say the one reason that a certification may be worth it is if you're trying to get out of your job that you have today and go somewhere else.
Yes.
that would be the only big reason. But if you're going somewhere else to look for a job and you don't know people at that company already, it's better to probably find out the people that are working there and try to get them, have them get you in through a side door.
Yeah. Or also to clarify, when I say it's not a bonus on experience, it is kind of a lack of experience. A lack of experience, I said 20 years of experience. It could be also, look, I spent 20 years on-prem. I want to jump into AWS game. How do I jump there? By changing the company. Excellent. What do I need? I need a certificate because I obviously don't have 5 years of experience, right?
Right.
So it's useful then.
If you enjoy taking certifications, I don't think we're saying it's a bad thing.
No.
Like if it's something that makes you happy, go for it. But most, let me put it this way: places I would want to work typically don't require certifications, because the companies that tend to require certifications are typically the ones I would not want to. I'm not saying degrees. I'm saying just, hey, in order for you to have this, I'm going to show my age for a minute. In order for you to get this job, you have to have an MCSE. Okay.
The place where actually certificates play a huge role, at least from my experience, is actually consulting companies. When they're bidding for a contract, right? You're bidding with a contract for a bank, and then you say, you know what? I have 30 people that have certificates A, B, and C. They're certified, right? Because there is no other way for consulting company. I mean, there are other ways, but for most consulting companies, you cannot say, oh, we have Martin Fowler.
Right.
He's our guy, kind of way. So you replace that with, we have people certified in that thing.
But anytime I hear the word certificate, I hear was able to pass the test. It doesn't mean you know jack about it. I remember the old days of the Novell and Microsoft paper. It's like, just because I could pass a test didn't mean I knew it.
Do you in US when you do when you get driver's license, do you need to pass a test, like kind of written test?
2 tests, written and driving. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like a written test, right? Yeah, it proves that you know what the stop sign looks like. Now we still don't know whether you can drive, right?
Right. So and they're not equivalent. A certification is not equivalent to experience. I will take somebody with experience that doesn't have a certification over somebody that only has a certification and no experience every day of the week. Okay. And Chris, you have a few other questions, so let's go through these here. Here we go. Talk about observability.
Yes, it's important.
All right, here. Let's go back to here. So let's finish up, because Chris put a few more comments on here. So the reason is to figure out the experience with that, and then the ding ding ding, which probably went into where am I looking to go to? I'm assuming that's probably it. And self-confidence. If it helps you, if it's like, hey, I got the certification, I was able to do it, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely nothing.
And that's got me snorting, Chris.
Hey, okay. So, do you know the last certificate that I got?
No, what is it?
.NET.
Yeah, mine was probably one of the
1 point something.
Yeah, mine was probably one of the MCSE exams back in the early 90s or mid 90s.
MCSE. That's a Microsoft thing, right?
The Microsoft. Yeah, I was a Microsoft certified engineer. Yeah.
We are certified in the same thing. Or
but those also expire, so it doesn't matter. It's fine. Okay, so let's get back to
remove it from my curriculum.
Yeah, well, my CV has been dead for a while. Observability. Let's define observability first, because that would be good. I don't think because on the podcast we've also not talked about observability directly. So let's define it.
It's about having. I'm not sure what I'm going to say is definition, but it's about having being able to observe any part of the system depending on what's going on, which kind of sounds too generic and obvious and all those things. But the thing is that most people or teams when they do not have really observability. They have kind of like memory usage, CPU and stuff like that. It's about being able to pinpoint to a problem and saying to detect the problem and pinpoint and saying, okay, boop 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 boop, alarm starts ringing, and then you say da 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 da. Okay, so actually this application, this function in that application running here is doing this, kind of pa pa pa, and you know what's going on. Right. And that sounds kind of like everybody has it, but actually not. It's very hard to pinpoint to a problem. And when I say pinpoint to the problem, it's not saying, this application is not working. Yeah, I know that.
Gee, thanks.
I know that.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it? Tell me what's wrong.
Yeah. So we had Eric Mizell on. Gosh, how long has it been? It's been a long time. And he actually works for a company called OverOps.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is an observability. You want to figure out where something is, and we're not pushing them for ACE. But if you've not really looked into it as, hey, I've been told I got to write some observability stuff. It's like, well, instead of writing, go see what's on the shelf. And this is one of those things that's on the shelf. So if you've not looked at OverOps before, it's just overops.com. It's interesting. It works with, do you remember what he said? It was Java, and they were just getting .NET in when we last talked to them, and Alex, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and going back to what Chris is just putting up here is to, trying to figure out the developer's awareness.
Yes. I wouldn't say that. Yeah. I do think it's actually very important. I could argue that it probably might not be the main reason for observability. There are more critical reasons for that. But yes, kind of being able to pinpoint, kind of this function is actually using half of all available CPU, or this is the bottleneck. The request comes into the system, goes through 5 services and comes to that one, and everything goes to hell. Being able to provide that information makes people understand.
Yeah.
Because that's really a common problem with developers, and I usually attack operators and testers. So here it goes for developers. It's kind of like,
all right,
you have no idea how your code behaves outside your laptop, don't you? Kind of like, you have no idea. Kind of like, hey, it works. A JavaScript application, blah, 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 blah. I write something, I run it in my browser locally. I have funky tools and all those things. Here you go. And then when things go bad, I did not know. Oh, really? That's an issue? Really? Honestly? Yeah.
You mean my stuff has to work with other people's stuff?
Yeah.
I don't test that. That's not my problem.
Yeah. You need 117 gigs of RAM for 10,000 concurrent users. Kind of like, I didn't know. Because it's me. I tested. I was one user when I tried it out.
Yeah, it works on my machine, only goes so far.
But I think that kind of that link between observability and developer awareness, I think that's very much covered with the ideas behind SREs.
Yes.
And that's one of the important focuses there, because ultimately, if you take Google as a shining example of SRE, their job is actually to make sure that it's working well in production up to a point, but the real job is actually to hand it over, kind of work with the team and make sure that they understand what is needed. That one.
Yep. So if you go out and if you haven't read the SRE books yet, they're free online. So you can read them online for free. You can still buy the hard copies too, but man, these are great books. And bottom line is, I'm assuming, Chris, you don't want to be on call all the time, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Make your developers read this. If your developers don't want to read this and figure out what it is, then they need to go get a new job. My opinion.
Here's the thing. Nobody should ever be on call for the things that they didn't do.
Ooh. You want to say that again?
Yes. Nobody should ever be on a call for the things they didn't do. So if you, I don't know, if you crash your car, don't call me in the middle of the night to come and rescue you. Kind of, at least unless I open a business that does that, right? So you're an application developer. It doesn't work in production. Take up, fix it.
Tag your
if it's So if you're in charge of infrastructure, then if the fault is of infrastructure, that's your business, kind of like, my infrastructure works, your application doesn't. I'm going to help you out.
Yeah.
But wait until 9 o'clock. Kind of like,
it's
like, not my thing.
My disk is still showing green. My CPUs are showing green. My everything from an infra perspective is showing green. That doesn't mean it's not me, but my observability is telling me it's not me.
But I remember, when I was young and foolish, stupid, I worked in those companies where actually I would be in a development team, and then there would be a completely separate team that actually does that, accept calls in the middle of the night, and kind of that was brilliant from my perspective. But I would never take that job.
Yeah.
And let me tell you that. So actually, it wasn't good from my perspective either, because unless it was they would restart a server at that time. That was a long time ago. That was the first step, right? And you know what would happen if that doesn't fix the issue? They would still need to call me, because how do they know what I did, how to fix it? If I didn't know that there is a problem, how the heck could they know?
Yeah, it's the things that we did, and unfortunately the things that I still see people doing really makes me scratch my head, because it shouldn't be this hard. Shouldn't be. But Chris, thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
That's
so nice.
Very, very nice. Thank you. It always makes me feel like, but thank you. Boy, that just sort of drained us out right there. It's like sad face was like.
You mentioned the pager. It's your fault.
I know. It's the page. Well, I mean, for
there's
people,
no excuse for doing that.
Yeah. So if you're on live right now, you probably know what a pager is. If you're watching this on replay and you don't know what a pager is, and you've never been on page duty, I'm not talking pager duty, not the service. I'm talking on page duty. Be thankful, because a pager in the middle of the night, there's nothing worse.
Yeah, we're talking about real pages.
Real pagers, yeah. In fact, let me see if I can find
one that you would carry on your belt. I don't have a belt here, sorry. But that one, right?
Hey, look, during this time that we've been in, I don't say the word, during this time that we've been in, I've worn pants once that actually I required a belt. I've been in stretchy pants. So here, let's go ahead and just share this up here real quick. We'll do that. So there are pagers. Now I used to actually carry this one right here, or this. I carried numbers of these. I never want to go back there again. It's always interesting to go into a hospital because you still see doctors use these. But
I think that at one moment I carried with me 3 pages and 2 or 3 mobiles.
Yeah, it's
everywhere. It was like Rambo, kind of like that had kind of like this ammunition here. It's just that it was on my belt.
Well, that's when I was in college. I was working at an AM/FM TV station. Like all 3 were in one building, and I carried a pager because I was on the engineering staff, and so I would get calls in the middle of like one of my engineering classes. I was like, "Hey, sorry, I gotta go to work." It's like, what do you mean you're in class? I went, no, transmitter just went down. I have to go out to the transmitter site. I thought it was cool back then. Little did I know that carrying a pager being less than 20 was a very bad idea. Of course, also in the 80s, people carrying pagers, that it was also used for very unsavory things as well. Dare I say illegal things.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm so glad the Motorola pagers, well, I mean, they're still around. Fortunately, we're just not using them. And also, thanks, Alex. We appreciate it. Everybody's being very nice to us today. Why do we receive niceties today? Are we being nice?
Now that you mentioned that comment, there is news. So FAS, Functions as a Service, is finished.
Yes.
I mean, not finished
right.
as if
not done.
Went down. Not finished as in they're part of history now, deprecated, but finished as in that part of the course is completed.
Oh, yes.
There is I was about to say, let me give you a TLDR, but we're going to save that for the podcast.
Yes. And by the way, if you haven't taken the survey yet, we'll talk about it now because I'd forgotten to talk about it earlier. Go take the survey because that will help determine the next few things. Now, what is the thing that you're working on right now for the course? What's the next?
So I'm still in serverless mode,
right?
But switching from functions as a service to containers as a service.
Right. So we're basically halfway sort of through serverless right now.
Depends. So when we finish containers as a service, I will go back to the survey, and we will go back to the survey and decide whether to jump to something else or to continue with serverless, because there is still the third big part, which is basically self-managed.
Right.
Serverless, right? With FAS, it is managed FAS, managed CAS, and then there is self-managed something.
Right.
And that will depend on the interest. I don't guarantee we'll do it. Depends on how many people thumbs up, thumbs down, and all this stuff.
Yeah. Don't self-manage unless you have to, please. for your sake and everybody else's.
I mean, depends. So
okay.
I could theoretically say, so there is somebody provides a service and there is a consumer of the service, right?
Yeah.
So like in my case, when I can make a choice, Google is my provider of the service and I'm consuming that, right?
Yep.
Now, I could argue, and without entering into practicalities, how feasible that is or no, that a team in a company can be a provider of a service and then others in that company are consuming the service. From that perspective, it is self-managed for that one team, but it is managed service for everybody else in that company.
Yeah. I think that's also just in general where a lot of people go wrong. They think they have to go all in and only have one thing. Instead, most people really should have 2-3 options. And then you figure out which one that fits best into, right? At least. Now, should you start with 2 or 3? Probably not. Try to stick with one, because as soon as you give people options, they're going to start taking options, whether they need to or not.
Yes. I mean, yes.
I said you may be quickly moving from 1 to 2, but start with 1. Because if you can wedge people in to a box, then that's good. If it's too painful to get into the box, create a trash can.
I mean, that's kind of the dilemma that I still cannot really wrap my head around. It is pointless if you have a big company with many teams. It is almost pointless for every team to do a completely different CI solution, completely different hosting solution, everything different, right? It's a waste of
business resources.
It's a repetition of the same thing. It's a reinvention of the wheel. On the other hand, it is just as big of a waste on the long run if everybody must use something.
Yes.
Because then you're killing any type of innovation, kind of like you must use mainframe. Kind of like everybody would still be on a mainframe if it's a must be, right?
Yeah.
And finding that balance, you cannot remove freedom from people to choose because then you don't have innovation, but you cannot let everybody spend a year reinventing the same thing.
Right. So let's ask this question. Should we be forcing everybody, if they are, I'm just going to say it, should everybody be packaging as a container image today?
Yes, no doubt. When applicable. So if you
if you're mainframe, then not. Yeah.
Mainframe, not. macOS, no. But
everything else
Linux
is
for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Kind of absolutely no doubt.
Windows, probably a very strong probability.
Yes. So, and just to clarify, which is probably what you wanted to say, that question does not indicate whether it should run as a container directly, whether it should be Kubernetes or anything, or ECS, right? It's just whether it should be
packaged that way.
Yeah. So
yes,
container image is a new jar or RPM or whatever was the thing, except that now there is one format to rule them all.
Right. Because as you were alluding to there, I can take that image and run it in EKS, GKE, AKS, on-prem Kubernetes. I could run it in ECS. I could run it in Cloud Run. It doesn't matter. It's an image. Right? That is the right answer for today, I think. Now,
I cannot imagine the reason not to package something as an image. Cannot imagine.
Yeah. Not today.
No, today, no. 3 years ago, okay.
No, yeah. Did I want to run Kubernetes 3 years ago? No. Well, actually, 3 years? No, not 3 years. That was 1.8. That was...
I was placing what was it, 3 years? Until 3 years ago, approximately, I was placing my bets on Swarm.
Yeah.
I was telling everybody, you're crazy. It's going to be Swarm.
You were wrong.
I was deceiving people.
Well, and at the time, Mesos was doing well. Right? Swarm was good. They both have fallen off to the side.
I mean, it sounds silly, but what was it? Maybe like 6 years ago or something like that. Within our company, we made the decision to go Swarm, and that looks to go Mesos, and that looks like a very bad decision now.
Yeah.
But I remember the time that was.
But then it was very smart. Yeah. It was the right.
Just appeared, and Swarm was kind of in some weird infancy or something like that.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what's going on.
Yeah. Let's get back to a question here. How do you scale Kubernetes? Multiple clusters or HPA? It depends.
No, wait, let me stop you there. I mean, multiple clusters or HPA. HPA is about scaling applications.
Applications, not the cluster.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's say cluster autoscaler, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
So it depends, right? There's numerous ways to scale. Back to when we had Carlos on, right?
Yeah.
With his day job, he's got numerous clusters globally. So the way he's scaling his application is over multiple clusters globally. If your application has to run globally, that's probably the right answer. If your application only needs to run in a region, that's not the right answer. A single cluster with cluster autoscaler is the way you scale the cluster.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple zones, one region. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, I understand, like in Carlos' situation, just to continue with your example, I understand, and I would probably make the same decision. You need to go multi-region, many clusters, and all those things. Yeah. But I would say if you're talking up to 100 nodes, and there is no very good reason, kind of latency millisecond, because if you exclude some very special cases, 100 nodes, one cluster, one region, let's say. One region, no doubt. It's too much hassle to go beyond one.
Let's go to the second question, because how do you design multiple clusters across multiple regions with databases? Now, I'm not sure that I understand the question.
So if you have, I'm trying to dissect now to to dissect the question, but I would guess if you're talking, you have multiple clusters in multiple regions, right? Yeah. At least one cluster in each region.
Yeah.
But they're all serving the same application, same data, same users. That means the databases need, because of latency, database application in one cluster cannot use database in a different cluster that is in a different region, right? Latency is too high. And the only solution that I can imagine is then you need to have different database clusters, to say something. I don't mean now physical clusters, but different databases, instances of replicate instances, and then figure out sharding, kind of how you're going to share the data.
Yeah, I mean,
and all that assumes that the usage of that data is not that dependent on accuracy and all those things. So if a user does a transaction, then needs to consult the transaction, better make sure that that user is in the same region. Kind of like, so you need to kind of, as a minimum, you need to make sure that once you identify your user, that user doesn't leave that region for a while.
Right. Well, that, and if you've got to do something completely global and you're using a standard relational database, you've probably picked the wrong database tool. You're probably going to need something that can handle multi-read, multi-write. Distributed multi-read, distributed multi-write. That's a Cassandra, that's a fill in the blank. There's numerous of them. But let me tell you, unless that's your day job, you don't want to do that. Dealing with conflict resolution, dealing with how you transport that stuff around. If this is if it's a global solution, somebody better be willing to pay the money to get the right solution for that. Right? Are you ignoring me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I was I lost myself. Anyways, yes. And so now what they don't know, I see there we're talking about AWS.
Yeah. So this is for a crypto exchange. So then I would.
So let me say this: use some database service from AWS.
Yes.
I'm not that familiar with them, but here's the logic: use their database that is multi-regional. And now here comes the tricky part. If it turns out that AWS
doesn't have
multi-region databases,
guess what?
You better give up as well on that idea.
Yep.
So use the service. Pay for it. It's worth every penny not to bother with the databases.
Yeah. Finding a solution that does that for you is what you want. If you're needing to be able to write and have sub-millisecond latency, good luck. Sorry. It doesn't exist. It exists, but it's people they're spending their whole life doing it.
But I would still kind of like, to me, that would be like last resort. We figured out that under no circumstances we can accomplish that database in the same region.
Yeah.
Or we are certain that we cannot.
Yeah, I mean, if you only need to write in one place and you're doing distributed reads, that's reasonable. You may have potential with write issues, but then your write shouldn't be. This is what we talked about. I think it's the episode that will come out this Wednesday. Is we're talking about when we it's getting ready to rain. So if I drop off, it's because I lost internet. So it's not that I don't love you guys.
So in US, internet fires are not covered, so they're not protected from rain.
So what was I talking about? Oh, help me. Oh, API. When you listen to, I think this upcoming week's podcast, we talk about accessing Postgres at one point, but we talk about accessing Postgres via API, not via a driver. And everything needs to be decoupled down to the APIs. If you have a direct dependency on disk, you're host. If you have a direct dependency on a network using a driver to get to a database, you're host. You need to be able to have now, if your network drops out, okay, then you're host anyway. It doesn't really matter. It all gets down to the network. But what is that transport setting on top of the network? We want that to be as lightweight and as reasonably fast as possible. Is it REST APIs? Not always. If you're needing latency, you're probably going to head towards protobuf or some other way of doing things. But you want it to be an API. So if you're doing multi-reads and they're able to replicate stuff around, that's great. But for your write, this is where I was going. For your write, you got to trust that database that you're trying to write to is gone, is not there. So that means you need to be able to capture the data that's being written. What does that mean? That means you're hitting a queue of some sort that's then getting consumed and then written. right? That's your guarantee. Your guaranteed delivery is the queue. So when we think that it's like, oh yeah, this is a PHP app and I've got a little MySQL database running on there. Now I need to scale this to the world. No. Sorry. I've seen that happen before. I haven't been a part of it, but I've seen it happen.
It's more like what I have a version towards the opposite face of that problem and that's probably not in Alex's situation. So I'm not really talking about this specific question, but I'm so displeased with trying to over-engineer from the start super big solution. And that's probably my own personal frustrations because I've worked in those companies. I worked for a huge consulting company for a while, and customers were always like that, kind of like, we're I don't know, like NATO. I worked for NATO, right, for a short while, and they want a solution for I don't know, that scale super, I don't know what, and then I don't know, 1,000 people working for 3 years, and then it's finally delivered. And how many real users you have? Like 50, 100, like two. Like, what did we do? We needed that because we don't know. Maybe 10 years from now we will have. Man, 10 years from now, this will not exist 10 years from now. If it exists, I will consider it a personal failure.
Okay, stop right there. I want you to basically restate what you just said. You don't say it word for word, but say it in Serbian, because that will sound much more angry. That's what I was like.
Yeah, but it doesn't go. I hardly ever speak Serbian. It it now requires effort from me to speak.
Okay, then Serbian. Don't do it then. Oh, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But it's those kinds of things to where it's that over optimization. So if you as an application developer, if you as an SRE, if you as anything that's on the downside that's having to implement something, question everything. It's like, because going back to your scenario, oh yeah, in 10 years we might. Think about 10 years ago. There was no Kubernetes. There was no Mesos. There was no Swarm. There was Tomcat.
But 10, 15 years ago, it's just replication between two instances of a database were just kind of like almost non-existence.
Yeah.
I mean, it existed. It's not that it didn't, but it was that horrible thing that hardly ever worked, and we were all crossing fingers. Like, let's make sure that it never happens, that we actually really need to use the second replica and stuff like that.
Right.
World was a horrible place. But so if we designed it, 10 years ago for something that we might need today, it's not going to be whatever we design.
It's a bad idea.
Now, it is also a bad idea not to take those things into account. Right. So you might want to choose a database that that can scale, right? So that's kind of a difference. You do not necessarily have to go start with, let's say, multi-region,
right?
But that does not mean that it's a bad idea to choose a database that can get you there one day if you want to.
Right.
Assuming that using the database does not mean double the initial investment, right? So you want to lower the investment. You want to do what is needed for that year, that month, while still understanding what might happen in the future.
Yeah. Looking ahead for stuff like that makes sense. But trying to design a global thing from day one, does it even work to begin with locally on my machine?
To be a good example would be, I get that question all the time. Should I use Kubernetes if you have only 1 or 3 nodes? And my answer is yes, you should.
Why?
I think you should.
Why is
because that's the standard API. That's the closest we have to a standard. That's where innovation is happening, and that's where that's the platform in which you will be able to run 1,000 nodes tomorrow if you need to. Right now, that Kubernetes shouldn't have Istio, right? Shouldn't have a bunch of other stuff. So it shouldn't be that full-fledged Kubernetes that has all the banks and whistles, but still, why not start with the Kubernetes even if you're going to use only 2-3 nodes?
Yeah.
I,
You're going to be probably using at least 2 nodes anyway. Because so why not just go ahead and take advantage of the fault tolerance that's built in, because you probably didn't write true HA. And if you're writing stateful applications, maybe you need to rethink how you're writing your stateful applications so they can become more stateless.
Yeah, exactly.
It's those kinds of things that it's basic re-architectures. And this is an episode, an idea around the episode we're having on the 22nd. We have a guest on that one. We just finished up the editing on it last night, and he gets into some of these concepts that I think are really important, because sometimes you've got to rethink. Hey, I've been a Spring Boot developer for the past 6 years, and I do all my stuff with Spring JPA or whatever it's called. Okay, well, that's only going to get you so far in a Kubernetes-based world. Or even forget Kubernetes, in a distributed-based world, right? Could you imagine Carlos having to do what he has to do? It's like, oh yeah, here's my Spring JPA, and it needs to connect to this database that's living in the data center in California.
JPA. I haven't heard that for a while.
Well, remember, I'm old, so it's fine. At least I didn't say the H word.
I mean, we spoke about pages, so we're moving forward in time. That's good.
It's yeah, we came back at least into the century, I think. Well, maybe. So anyway, and we're almost at the top of the hour, so let me go ahead and wrap up a couple things here. If you haven't taken our, don't edit that. If you haven't taken the survey yet, please go take the survey. It's at devopsparadox.com/survey for the transcriber that's getting this. And if you haven't joined up in our Slack workspace, shortcut to go do that is at devopsparadox.com/Slack. I think that's about it. We should be back again next Friday, because I'm still not on the road. You're not on the road. We're just here, sitting in the box, talking to you right there, right there.
Oh, that's a moment you do this, huh?
Yeah, there you go. Wait, let's both do it, because that'll be a good thumbnail for this. Okay, yeah. All right, good. That's good enough. Sorry to scare y'all. So let's call it good for there today. Let me get down here so I can do the final close. But if you haven't listened to this week's podcast episode about Serverless 101, that's the first in a series of probably 3 or 4, however the number ends up being. We don't know exactly yet. We've got 3 done, so I think we've got 1 more coming. There'll be 4 of where we think serverless is. And don't think serverless just as functions, even though that's what Victor's been working on in the course right now, has just been functions. It's a lot bigger than that. Are we excited about serverless?
Oh, serverless is the future. I have absolutely no doubt about that.
But functions may not be the future. It could be part of the future, but not the future. And that's
I don't want to swear the last minute of the show. Functions are horrible. They're horrible. They're so horrible.
But we'll discuss that again maybe next week. Thanks, everybody, for showing up today. We'll talk to you again next week.